In an isolated mansion, a tech millionaire has lived tied to a wheelchair since birth. His routine is shaken when a young girl insists, with unshakable faith, that she saw him walking in her dreams. Intrigued, he travels to an ancestral village where he begins to question everything he thought he knew. There, he discovers that the true miracle is not walking, but reconnecting with his roots. The Avery family mansion stood imposingly high in the Appalachian Mountains in Aspen, Colorado. Among ancient redwoods and under the clear sky that only Colorado and altitudes can provide, Theodore Maxwell Avery's residence stood out not only for its modern architecture, but also for the security systems that made it a digital fortress. It was to be expected from the home of one of the United States' greatest cybersecurity entrepreneurs. At 42, Theodore had been confined to a motorized wheelchair since birth, a consequence of a rare neurological condition. What he lacked in mobility, he compensated for in business acumen. His company, SecureTech America, provided protection systems for the country's main banks and government institutions. He was a respected man, feared by some but rarely loved. On that autumn morning, the meticulously controlled silence of the mansion was broken by the intercom on Theodore's desk. "Mr. Avery, we have an unusual situation at the main gates." The voice of Helen Miller, his personal assistant for over a decade, sounded as controlled as ever. "Define unusual." "Helen," he replied without taking his eyes off the monitors displaying graphs and code sequences. "A child. A girl. We don't know how she got here. She's barefoot and insists on speaking with you personally." Theodore finally averted his gaze from the screens. The property was at least 2 miles from the main road. Children didn't just appear there. "Have George check if there are any adults nearby, then send her away." "We've already done that, sir." George searched the entire area. "She seems to have come alone. She says she has an important message for you." Something in Helen's voice had changed. There was an unusual hesitation. "What else, Helen?" A sigh from the other end of the line. "She mentioned your legs, sir." The entrepreneur felt a chill run down his spine. Very few people outside his inner circle knew about his condition. His public image was carefully controlled, always behind desks that concealed his chair. "Bring her to the Winter Garden. I want to see who this girl is personally." 15 minutes later, Theodore watched through the glass panels the girl waiting in the garden. She was approximately 10 years old, with sun-kissed brown skin, black curly hair falling over her shoulders. She wore a simple dress, faded from use, and as Helen had said, she was barefoot. Her posture, however, was not one of submission. She looked around with curiosity, as if evaluating the place. The automatic door slid silently open, and Theodore steered his chair outside. The girl turned immediately towards him, as if she already knew he was there. "Hello," Theodore said, maintaining a safe distance. "They told me you wanted to see me." The smile that spread across the girl's face was radiant and fearless. "My name is Yara Summers. I came from Sedona Valley, in the Arizona highlands. My grandma Juniper sent me here to tell you your legs are healed." Theodore blinked, confused. Sedona Valley? He had never heard of it. And that absurd claim. How many times had he heard that before? Healers, alternative therapists, charlatan doctors, all with the same empty promise. It had never worked. It never would. "How did you get here, Yara?" he asked, deliberately ignoring the statement about his legs. "I came by bus to the city and then walked. The path showed itself to me." "You walked over 2 miles uphill alone." "I wasn't alone," she replied simply. "The guides came with me." Theodore sighed. She was probably the child of some local employee, or worse, part of some elaborate scam. "Listen, I'll ask Helen to take you back home." "Leave a contact number and—" "You will walk," Yara interrupted, her childish voice imbued with a disturbing conviction. "I saw it in my dreams. You walking in a field of yellow flowers, with the wind blowing through your hair. Your mother and grandmother cry with happiness when they see you standing." A heavy silence fell between them. Theodore's mother had passed away 3 years ago, and his paternal grandmother, the only one he had known, was in a nursing home battling advanced Alzheimer's. "How do you know about my family?" "I don't know. I just see. Just as I see that you have the same blood running in your veins as mine." The girl took a step forward, approaching the chair. "You belong to the valley. The cure is there waiting." There was something in that child's gaze, a mix of innocence and ancient wisdom, that completely destabilized Theodore. He wasn't the kind of man who believed in coincidences, much less in miraculous cures, but he also couldn't ignore the precision of the information she seemed to possess. "George will take you home." "Yara!" He turned his chair, preparing to return to the office. "When you are ready, just head to the valley," she said to his back. "Your great-grandmother's tree still blooms there even after so many years." Theodore stopped, feeling a shiver run down his spine again. His great-grandmother? He barely knew her name. Mary something. It was a subject his family never discussed. He turned slowly and met the girl's dark eyes fixed on him, unblinking. "How do you know about my great-grandmother?" "The blood knows, Mr. Avery. The blood always knows." That night, after confirming that Yara had been safely taken to the Aspen bus station, Theodore couldn't sleep. The girl's words echoed in his mind. Normally, he would have dismissed it as an attempt at manipulation, or at best a child's vivid imagination. But there were too many details. Specific information that should not have been accessible to a barefoot girl from a place called Sedona Valley. The next morning, still disturbed, Theodore did something he rarely did. He asked for help. "Helen, I need you to investigate everything about a place called Sedona Valley in the Arizona Highlands, and also about a Summers family from there, specifically a woman named Juniper Summers and her granddaughter Yara." His assistant nodded without question, as she always did. "And Helen," he added hesitantly, "also check if there's any connection to my maternal great-grandmother. Mary Celeste, I think her name was." While waiting for the information, Theodore tried to focus on work, but for the first time in years, the codes and algorithms couldn't fully capture his attention. There was a growing restlessness, an uncomfortable tingling that didn't come from his immobile legs, but from somewhere deeper. 3 days later, Helen entered his office with a folder in her hands and an expression Theodore knew well. She had found something significant. "Mr. Avery, I think you'll want to see this with your own eyes. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from." Continuing, Helen opened the folder on Theodore's desk, revealing photographs, documents, and printed reports. The meticulous organization was her trademark. "Sedona Valley really exists, sir. It's a district of Flagstaff in the Arizona Highlands, a region known for its natural beauty, but also for alternative communities that have settled there in recent decades." Theodore examined the photos of the small village. Simple houses, many of wattle and adobe, dirt roads, imposing mountains in the background, crystal-clear waterfalls, a place that seemed to exist in another temporal dimension, disconnected from the speed of the digital world he inhabited. And about the girl and her grandmother? Helen slid another set of documents to him. Juniper Summers, 67 years old, known locally as a healer, midwife, and guardian of traditional knowledge. There are records of people traveling from afar for consultations with her, including surprisingly doctors from the capital. Helen paused, and some documented cases of recoveries considered improbable by conventional medicine. Theodore raised an eyebrow. "Cases like what exactly?" "Reversed partial paralyses, stabilized autoimmune conditions, unexpected neurological recoveries." Helen adjusted her glasses, clearly uncomfortable. As a woman of science, this challenged her understanding. The granddaughter, Yara, is 10 years old. She is known in the region for having what they call the sight. She supposedly dreams of people who need help. Theodore absorbed this information in silence. Part of him wanted to dismiss everything as superstition and coincidence, but he was, above all, a man of data and analysis. "And most importantly," Helen continued, pointing to the last set of documents, "your maternal great-grandmother, Mary Celeste Avery, born Mary Celeste Summers, is originally from Sedona Valley." That revelation hit Theodore like a physical blow. His motorized chair recoiled a few inches involuntarily. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely." Ware found her birth certificate in the Flagstaff County records. Born in 1913 in Sedona Valley, moved to Miami at 18, where she met your great-grandfather. Then to New York City and finally Los Angeles. The words of the girl Yara echoed in Theodore's mind. "You have the same blood running in your veins as mine." Could it be possible? A distant kinship between him and that barefoot child. "Helen, I want you to contact Dr. Richard. Tell him I'll need him for a trip." His assistant didn't hide her surprise. You're going there? To Sedona Valley? Yes, he replied, already steering his chair towards the window. Prepare everything. We leave in 3 days. Theodore's decision shocked not only Helen but his entire team. In 2 decades, he had never been away from the company for more than a weekend. His routine was as precise as a Swiss watch. Wake up at 5 a.m., work until 10 p.m., sleep, repeat. His physical needs were met by highly qualified professionals, physical therapists, doctors, nutritionists, all hired to maximize his comfort without disturbing his productivity. Dr. Richard Foster, his personal physician for 15 years, was the most vocal against the trip. Theodore, understand that we are talking about a remote region with precarious roads and questionable sanitary conditions, he argued during the preparatory meeting. Your condition requires specific care. And for what? Because of a child's words? It's not just that, doctor. Theodore turned his chair to face the doctor directly. It's the connection to my family, to my origins. You know how much we've tried over the years. Every experimental treatment, every promised therapy. Nothing worked. And you think herbs and chants in an isolated village will achieve what the most advanced medicine couldn't? The doctor's tone wavered between disbelief and genuine concern. I don't know what to expect, honestly. But I need to go. I feel like I owe it to myself. On the 3rd day, the small entourage departed. A private jet to Miami, followed by a helicopter to the city of Flagstaff, and finally an adapted van for the last few hours of travel to Sedona Valley. Theodore insisted on taking a minimal team. Helen, Dr. Richard George, his driver and personal security, and 2 nurses. The dirt road leading to the village snaked between rugged mountains and deep valleys. Through the van window, Theodore observed an exuberant nature that seemed untouched by time. Ancient trees, distant waterfalls, impressive rock formations, a wild beauty that he, a city man to the core, had never truly contemplated. It's incredible that places like this still exist in the United States, commented Helen, who also seemed mesmerized by the landscape. It's like going back in time, George agreed at the wheel, skillfully navigating the sharp curves of the road. After almost 3 hours of travel from Flagstaff, they finally sighted Sedona Valley, a small village nestled among mountains, with colorful houses scattered organically across the hillside. In the center, a square with a huge tree that stood out in the landscape. As the van approached, Theodore noticed people stopping their activities to watch. It was not common to see vehicles of that size there. Some children began to run alongside the vehicle, waving and smiling with curiosity. I don't think we've exactly gone unnoticed, Dr. Richard murmured, visibly tense. The van stopped at the entrance to the small central square. An elderly man with grey hair and beard, dressed simply but with a dignified posture, approached to greet them. Welcome to Sedona Valley, he said with a deep, serene voice. I am Anthony Sterling, a community representative. Little Yara told us you would be coming, Mr. Avery. Theodore frowned, surprised. She knew I was coming, but I only decided 3 days ago. The old man smiled, revealing surprisingly white and aligned teeth. Yara knows many things before they happen. It's a gift she carries, just like her grandmother. George activated the van's lift platform, allowing Theodore's chair to descend to the dirt street level. A small crowd had already formed around, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly curious. Where is she? Where is Yara? Theodore asked, feeling strangely anxious. She's with her grandmother, preparing for your arrival. If you permit, I'd like to take you to your lodging first. We've prepared the old teacher's house, which has easy access for your chair. As they followed the main street, Theodore noticed the mixed glances, curiosity, hope, distrust. It was as if his arrival represented something significant to those people, although he didn't quite understand what. They arrived at a simple but spacious house with a newly built ramp at the entrance. The interior was surprisingly airy and clean, with solid wood furniture that exuded the characteristic aroma of beeswax. It's not what you're used to, but I hope it's comfortable, said Mr. Sterling. The main bedroom has been adapted, and there's solar power for your medical equipment. Theodore looked around, impressed by the predictability and organization. It was as if they had been waiting for him for a long time. When can I meet Grandma Juniper? She will come at sunset, Mr. Sterling replied. There's the time when the paths between the visible and invisible become clearer, as she says. After Mr. Sterling left, Dr. Richard couldn't contain his apprehension. Theodore, this is all very strange. How did they know exactly when we would come? And all this preparation? It seems staged. Or perhaps, Helen interrupted, watching the movement in the small square from the window. We are facing something we cannot explain with our usual logic. Theodore remained silent, contemplating the new environment. For the first time in a long time, he felt something different. It wasn't hope. He had given up on that years ago. It was something more primitive, more visceral, as if somehow that unknown place recognized him. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they heard soft knocks on the door. Helen opened it, revealing little Yara, now wearing a simple but clean white dress, still barefoot. Beside her, a woman of medium height, back straight despite her age, white hair braided into an elaborate bun, dark, penetrating eyes like her granddaughter's. "Welcome to the valley. Son of Mary Celeste," Grandma Juniper said, stepping forward. "Your great-grandmother finally managed to bring you back home." Grandma Juniper's presence filled the room with an energy Theodore had never experienced before. It was as if the air around her vibrated at a different frequency. She approached the wheelchair without ceremony or pity in her gaze, just genuine curiosity. "May I?" she asked, extending her wrinkled hands towards Theodore's inert legs. Dr. Richard stepped forward, positioning himself defensively. "Madam, I must inform you that Mr. Avery's condition is the result of a rare congenital neurological condition that affects the nerves of the spinal cord. It is not something that can be treated with methods," he hesitated, searching for a diplomatic word, "traditional." Grandma Juniper smiled without taking her eyes off Theodore. "Doctor, I respect your medicine, but the body is just the shell of the problem. The root is much deeper." Something in the woman's firmness made Theodore push away the doctor's protective hand. "It's all right, Richard. Let her." Grandma Juniper's hands rested on his legs. Although he could see the contact, Theodore couldn't feel it, a reality he had grown accustomed to throughout his life. However, as she kept her palms pressed against his thighs, a strange warmth began to spread. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something harder to define. "The blood recognizes the path," the healer murmured, closing her eyes. "It is blocked, but it is not cut. Like a river that found a dam, but continues to flow underground." She removed her hands and looked at him intently. "We start tomorrow at sunrise. Come to the big tree in the center of the square. It's the same one your great-grandmother was born under." After Grandma Juniper and Yara left, a heavy silence settled in the room. Helen was the first to break it. "What did you feel, Theodore?" He took a long time to answer, still processing the experience. "Nothing physical, but something different." He turned to the doctor. "Richard, you know I'm not a man of faith or superstitions. I'm here to investigate a family connection, and at most test an unconventional approach we've never tried." The doctor sighed, visibly displeased. "As your doctor, I must register my concern. As your longtime friend, I only ask that you don't foster unrealistic hopes." At dawn the next day, George pushed Theodore's chair down the main street towards the big tree. The entrepreneur had insisted on going only with his security guard, leaving Helen and the doctor at the house. He needed to experience it without Richard's skeptical filter or his assistant's constant analysis. The tree was a colossal redwood with a trunk so wide it would take 10 men holding hands to encircle it. Thick roots emerged from the soil like sleeping serpents. Under its generous shade, they found Grandma Juniper, Yara, and 3 other women of different ages, each holding some element: a basin of water, a small brazier with smoldering herbs, a flask of oil, and a gourd with what appeared to be red clay. "The Summers women have always been guardians of this sacred place," Grandma Juniper explained upon seeing him arrive, "just as your great-grandmother was before she left." The ritual began with Grandma Juniper chanting in a language Theodore didn't recognize. It wasn't English nor Spanish or any other European language. It had an African cadence, but with elements that sounded indigenous. It was like hearing the voice of the earth itself. The other women moved around the chair, applying the elements: warm water to his legs, smudging with herbs over his entire body, oil to his temples and forehead, and finally, red clay was applied in specific patterns over his bare feet and ankles. Theodore observed everything with a mixture of skepticism and fascination. Part of him, the pragmatic executive, categorized it as harmless folklore. Another part, perhaps the one carrying the summer's blood, felt a growing restlessness, as if dormant cells in his body were beginning to awaken. The ritual lasted almost 2 hours. At the end, Grandma Juniper approached again. "Now the hardest part, silence. For 7 days you will come here at sunrise and stay until the sun is high in the sky. You will not speak to anyone during the sessions. Just listen. The body knows the way back, it just needs to remember." During the first week, Theodore kept the commitment more out of curiosity than conviction. Each morning was the same, the ritual with the elements followed by long hours of contemplation under the tree. Nothing happened, no sensation, no revelation, just the discomfort of being exposed to the occasional glances of the inhabitants passing through the square. Dr. Richard monitored his vital signs daily and didn't hide his disapproval. "This is a waste of time, Theodore. Next week we're going back to Los Angeles. You gave this a chance." On the 8th day, something changed. During the morning session, while fixing his gaze on the exposed roots of the ancestral tree, Theodore felt a subtle tingling in the tip of his right big toe. It was so sudden and unexpected that his breath caught for a moment. He hadn't felt anything below his waist since he could remember. He tried to move his toes voluntarily. Nothing happened. Perhaps he had imagined it. Perhaps it was just a psychosomatic reaction after days of suggestion. But the next day, the tingling returned, more intense, extending to his ankle. And the following week, during a heavy storm that kept everyone sheltered, an involuntary spasm shook his left leg while he was lying down. Dr. Richard, witnessing the movement, tried to explain, "Involuntary muscle spasms are common in patients with your condition, Theodore. It doesn't mean neural recovery." But 3 weeks after arriving in the valley, the inexplicable occurred. During the morning ritual, with Yara sitting in front of him, humming softly, Theodore managed, for the first time in his entire life, to voluntarily move his right big toe. It was a minimal, almost imperceptible movement, but undeniably intentional. The news spread quickly through the village. That night, the residents organized a small celebration in the central square. Music, traditional food, dancing around the bonfire. Theodore, normally averse to crowds, was surprised to find himself enjoying the simplicity of shared joy. Mr. Sterling sat beside his chair, offering him a glass of homemade liquor. "You know, Mr. Avery, no one here is surprised. When Yara has a vision, she's never wrong." "Why me?" Theodore asked, watching the children playing around the bonfire. "Why now?" The old man took a long sip of his liquor before answering. "They say the Summers have a gift that comes from before the Europeans, before the slave ships, a healing gift that passes through the blood. Your great-grandmother was special, even among the Summers. Did you know my great-grandmother?" "Only the stories my father told. Mary Celeste was known as the girl who spoke with trees. She had hands that calmed storms in flesh and spirit." Mr. Sterling paused significantly, "until she abandoned the gift and left for the big city. That's when the curse began." Curse? Theodore felt a shiver run down his spine. When a gift is denied, it doesn't disappear. It becomes twisted, waiting. In subsequent generations, what should heal sickens. What should strengthen weakens. The old man pointed to Theodore's legs. "In the families of healers who deny their calling, the legs are the first to fail. It's as if the earth prevents them from moving further away." That night, Theodore could barely sleep. Mr. Sterling's words reverberated in his mind, mixing with fragmented memories of his childhood, his mother lighting candles on specific dates without ever explaining why, his grandmother rubbing herbs on her hands before touching his forehead when he was sick, his father's discomfort whenever the subject of his maternal family came up, small signs he had never connected. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of a woman with long black hair under a redwood tree, singing to a child in her arms. The woman looked up directly at him and smiled, a smile he recognized as his own. A violent storm woke Theodore in the early hours of the morning. Lightning illuminated the room in bluish flashes, followed by the deafening rumble of thunder. He remembered that George had mentioned something about the house's water collection system. The reservoir needed to be closed during heavy rains. Not wanting to wake anyone at that hour, Theodore maneuvered his chair to the back porch, where the system was located. The rain was coming in sideways, wetting the wooden floor. As he tried to reach the reservoir lever, a particularly strong lightning bolt struck something nearby, causing a boom that made the entire house vibrate. The motorized chair failed, shutting down completely. Trapped, partially wet from the incoming rain, Theodore tried to call for help, but the noise of the storm swallowed his voice. That's when he noticed a small trap door in the floor, partially covered by a rug displaced by the wind. With effort, he leaned over and pulled the metal ring, revealing a compartment, probably an old hiding place for provisions or valuables. Inside, he found a wooden box carved with symbols he recognized from Grandma Juniper's ritual. With difficulty, he reached for the box and opened it. It contained documents yellowed with age, old photographs, a rosary of seeds, and at the bottom, a leather-bound notebook with the name Mary Celeste Summers engraved in faded gold letters. With trembling hands, Theodore opened his great-grandmother's diary. By the intermittent light of the lightning, Theodore began to read Mary Celeste's diary. The handwriting was elegant but firm, strokes of a woman who, despite being born in a remote village, had received a formal education. May 10, 1930. Today I left Sedona Valley forever. I carry with me only the essentials, some clothes, my mother's rosary, and the burden of knowledge I would rather abandon. The city doctor says my husband will have a better chance in a Los Angeles hospital. I know it's not doctors who can save him, but I cannot use the gift. Not anymore. The price is too high. Theodore turned a few pages, absorbing fragments of his great-grandmother's life. September 15, 1931. My daughter was born today. Healthy in almost all respects, but with a weakness in her legs that doctors cannot explain. I know what it is. The blood demands what is due. The denied gift manifests as a curse. I promised my mother I would never again use my hands to heal, that I would leave behind the healing songs and the rituals under the sacred tree. But seeing my daughter's frail legs, I feel the calling stronger than ever. Lightning continued to illuminate the room as Theodore turned the pages with increasing urgency. Here was the story they never told him. The origin of the ailment that afflicted him was not just biological, but carried dimensions that modern science did not contemplate. June 3, 1932. I tried the ritual with my daughter today, secretly. I sang the old songs, applied the consecrated oils, invoked the invisible guardians. For a brief moment I saw strength in her legs, a movement that hadn't existed before. But then pain hit me like 1,000 needles piercing my chest. The warning was clear. Fulfill your oath or suffer the consequences. The choice was mine. Now it's too late. The rain began to subside when Theodore reached the last written pages of the diary, dated 1958. My granddaughter was born yesterday. She is the living image of the valley, skin the color of fertile earth, eyes deep as the caves of the highlands. My heart broke to see her little legs. The curse continues, stronger with each generation. I know now what I must do. I cannot return to the valley. The oath binds me here. But I can prepare the way so that one day someone of my blood will return and undo the knot I tied. I have planted the seeds. Now it only remains to wait for them to germinate at the right time. That granddaughter was Theodore's mother, and he the third generation affected by the curse mentioned by his great-grandmother. When the storm finally ceased, the first rays of sun began to penetrate through the window cracks. George found Theodore still on the porch, the diary open on his lap, his face marked by silent tears he hadn't even realized he had shed. That day, contrary to everyone's expectations, Theodore asked to be taken to Grandma Juniper's house, not to the big tree. The healer's house was set back from the village center, near a small stream. It was a simple but welcoming construction, surrounded by a meticulously cared-for garden, where medicinal herbs and flowers grew in apparent disorder, though Theodore suspected there was a specific pattern in their arrangement. Grandma Juniper received him as if she already knew the reason for his untimely visit. "You found the diary," she stated, not asked, as she served herbal tea in handmade ceramic mugs. "How did you know about it? How did you know I would find it?" The old woman smiled, sitting opposite him. Yara saw it in dreams. The storm, the chair stopping, the discovery. Blood chooses its paths. Theodore placed the diary on the rustic table. My great-grandmother speaks of an oath, of a choice she made, of abandoning a gift. Mary Celeste was the most powerful healer the valley had ever known. At 16, she was already performing cures that the elders couldn't. But she fell in love with a man from the city, an engineer who came to study the region's caves. Grandma Juniper paused, sipping her tea. His family would not accept a country healer as a daughter-in-law, and he himself feared her gift. So she made a choice. She renounced her gift, turned her back on her roots. She swore never again to practice the healing arts. And that caused the... Theodore hesitated, feeling foolish pronouncing the word curse. There is no curse, my son. There is balance. When we deny who we truly are, the universe finds ways to remind us. The healing gift of the summers does not disappear, it transforms. In subsequent generations it manifested as its opposite, the infirmity in the legs, the blocked path. She extended her hand, touching Theodore's inert knees. Your great-grandmother knew that one day someone of her blood would need to return to undo the knot. And that someone would be me? He asked, incredulous. A man who built his entire life around technology, logical systems, science. Precisely because of that, the circle closes. What was divided reintegrates. Technology and tradition, science and ancestry. The following days were of intense transformation for Theodore. After revealing the diary's discovery to Helen and Dr. Richard, he completely surrendered to the treatment proposed by Grandma Juniper, no longer as a curious experiment, but as a profound commitment. The morning sessions under the tree became more intense. Now they included exercises that combined visualization and small movements, always guided by Grandma Juniper's rhythmic voice and Yara's soft chants. Dr. Richard, initially skeptical, began to document the changes with growing astonishment. The involuntary spasms gave way to controlled movements, first in his toes, then ankles, and finally knees. They were limited, shaky movements, but undeniably voluntary. I cannot explain this with the medicine I know, the doctor admitted after a particularly surprising examination, 6 weeks after their arrival in the valley. The innovation is regenerating somehow. It's as if your body is relearning neural pathways that never existed before. Helen, who had temporarily taken over Secure Tech remotely, became increasingly integrated into village life. Her organizational efficiency soon made her beloved by the community, especially when she began implementing small improvements, such as a satellite communication system that allowed emergency contact with regional hospitals without interfering with the traditional lifestyle. George, for his part, discovered an unexpected vocation for carpentry, spending hours learning from a local artisan who made adapted furniture. The deepest transformation, however, was happening within Theodore. The man who arrived in Sedona Valley was an obstinate executive, isolated in his technological fortress, measuring the world in terms of efficiency and control. Now he learned to value the silence between words, the wisdom in the elders' stories, the beauty in simplicity. One afternoon, during an especially intense session under the redwood tree, Theodore felt something that made him hold his breath. An intense heat ran through his legs, from his toes to his hips like an electric current. It was so sudden and powerful that he let out an involuntary sound, half groan, half laugh. Yara, who was sitting nearby, broke into a wide smile. "It's happening," she said, clapping her hands with joy. "The blood is remembering the way." That night, for the first time, Theodore managed to stand for a few seconds, supported between George and an improvised bar. His legs trembled violently, and the effort covered his face with sweat, but he remained upright for almost 10 seconds before returning to his chair, exhausted and euphoric. The entire village celebrated the achievement. An impromptu party took over the central square, with music, food, and dancing around the bonfire. Theodore watched everything from his chair, deeply moved, when Mr. Sterling approached. "There's something you need to see, Mr. Avery, something that might complete the cycle." With George's help, they followed a side path that led to a higher area of the village. There, under the moonlight, stretched a field of small yellow flowers that swayed gently in the night breeze. "It's exactly like in Yara's dream," Theodore murmured, instantly recognizing the landscape. "This place was special to your great-grandmother," Mr. Sterling explained. "It's called the Field of Ancestors. They say here the veil between worlds is thinner. Those who come with an open heart find answers." They left Theodore alone for a few minutes. Under the starry highland sky, surrounded by the sweet scent of yellow flowers, he closed his eyes. And then a strange sensation enveloped him, as if he were simultaneously there and somewhere else. He saw, or perhaps felt, the presence of a woman with long black hair and a familiar smile. There were no words, only a deep understanding that transcended language. When he reopened his eyes, Theodore knew what he needed to do. The morning after the experience in the Field of Ancestors, Theodore woke with a clarity he had never felt before. His body was still limited, but his mind seemed to have expanded, embracing perspectives he would have previously dismissed as irrational. "We need to talk," he said, when Helen entered his room with breakfast. "About secure tech and about my future." His assistant watched him intently, noticing the change in his eyes, a determined sparkle that went beyond his usual obsession with results. "I'm listening," she replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I want to restructure the company, not just administratively, but in its fundamental purpose." Theodore adjusted himself in bed, using his strengthened arms to sit more upright. "The technology we develop can do much more than protect corporate data. It can preserve ancestral knowledge that is disappearing. It can build bridges between traditional wisdom and scientific innovation." Helen smiled, not seeming surprised. "I was expecting something like this. The Valley changed you, Theodore." "The Valley reminded me who I truly am," he corrected her. "I want to create a foundation, linked to secure tech, focused on the digital documentation of traditional knowledge, initially here in the Highlands, then in other communities across the United States." As they discussed the project's details, they heard a commotion outside. George rushed into the room. "Mr. Avery, it's raining heavily in the mountains. The river is rising rapidly. The residents are mobilizing." Through the window, they could see people running with sandbags, tools, and tarps. Despite being the rainy season, that volume of water was unusual. The small stream that cut through the village was beginning to overflow, threatening the houses closest to the banks. "Take me there," Theodore ordered, already moving towards his chair. Dr. Richard immediately intervened. "Don't even think about it. The commotion, the exposure to rain and uneven terrain could jeopardize all the progress we've made." For the first time in weeks, the old Theodore resurfaced, authoritarian and inflexible. "I'm not asking for permission, Doctor. These people welcomed me, showed me a path to healing. I'm not going to stay here protected while they struggle." The doctor sighed, recognizing the futility of arguing. "At least wear a raincoat and stay in stable areas." Soon they were in the central square, which had become the coordination point for the efforts. Mr. Sterling distributed tasks, while Grandma Juniper and other older women prepared hot food for the workers. The rain fell incessantly, turning the dirt streets into muddy streams. To everyone's surprise, Theodore quickly took on a central role in organizing the efforts. His analytical mind, trained to identify vulnerabilities in complex systems, proved to be a valuable tool in the crisis. "The critical point is not here in the center," he explained, pointing to an improvised map of the village. "It's the river bend near the abandoned mill. If we reinforce that stretch with a double barrier, we can redirect the excess flow to the low field, saving the houses." The strategy worked. While some groups filled and positioned sandbags at the indicated point, others evacuated the few residents from the most vulnerable areas. Helen coordinated communication between the teams, using the radio system she had implemented weeks earlier. Yara appeared beside Theodore, drenched but smiling. "You're doing what Mary Celeste did," she said, looking at him with admiration. "What do you mean? Your great-grandmother didn't just heal people. She also knew how to read nature's signs, predict floods, protect the valley. Grandma says this is the other side of the gift. Understanding systems, seeing invisible connections." The girl's words echoed deeply in Theodore. In a way, his career in digital security had always involved exactly that, identifying hidden patterns, predicting vulnerabilities, protecting what was valuable. What changed was only the context, not the essence. The rain continued for 3 days. The village suffered minor damage. Some lost crops, a damaged mill temporarily blocked roads. But no houses were lost. No one was injured. The community attributed this to the strategy coordinated by Theodore, which had transformed a potential tragedy into a manageable inconvenience. On the evening of the third day, when the rain finally subsided, they held a small ceremony of gratitude under the redwood tree, still partially soaked. Bonfires were lit, percussion instruments appeared, and soon the sound of traditional chants filled the damp air. Theodore watched the celebration from his chair, surrounded by the warmth of the community, when he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Grandma Juniper, with a special twinkle in her eyes. "It's time," she said simply. With George and Dr. Richard's help, Theodore was positioned near the trunk of the large tree. Improvised support bars were placed on each side. The music gradually ceased, and an expectant silence filled the place. Grandma Juniper began a low chant, soon joined by Yara and other women of the Summers family. It was the same ancestral melody from the morning rituals, but now charged with the collective energy of the entire community. Theodore closed his eyes, concentrating on the sensation in his legs. The familiar tingling was there, more intense than ever, descending from his hips to his toes. Leaning his hands on the bars, he began to push, slowly raising his body. A monumental effort, a pain that pierced muscles dormant for decades. His legs trembled violently, threatening to give way at any moment. Dr. Richard was ready, prepared to support him if necessary, but kept far enough away not to interfere. 1 inch after another, Theodore rose from the chair. The entire community held its breath. When he finally reached an upright position, a collective murmur of admiration spread through the crowd. He was standing, trembling, supported, his face contorted with effort but indisputably on his own 2 feet. Then came the next challenge. Still holding the support bars, Theodore tried to take a step. His right foot lifted a few inches from the ground, moved forward hesitantly and landed again. The left followed, in an uncoordinated but determined movement. 1 step, then another, and another. At the 4th step, his legs gave way. George quickly moved forward, supporting him before he fell. Exhausted, Theodore was guided back to his chair to the emotional applause of the entire community. Yara ran to him, her eyes shining with excitement. "You walked, exactly like in my dream." Theodore smiled, breathless from the effort. "I'm not ready for fields of flowers yet, but it's a start." That night marked a definitive change. In the days that followed, Dr. Richard established an intense physical therapy program to complement the traditional treatments. Theodore's recovery accelerated. Each day, his steps became firmer, his stamina increased, his coordination improved. 2 weeks after the flood, sitting on the house's porch with Helen, Theodore made decisions that would change the course of his life. "I'm going to pass the executive presidency of SecureTech to Michael," he said, referring to his vice president. "I'll remain on the board, but I want to dedicate myself to the new foundation. We'll call it Digital Roots." Helen took notes, efficient as ever, but with a different smile on her face. In the weeks in the valley, their professional relationship had transformed into something closer, more genuine. "What will be the first projects?" "Her community center here in the valley. Cutting-edge technology, combined with spaces for the preservation of traditional knowledge. We'll start by digitally documenting healing practices, oral histories, agricultural techniques. Then we'll expand to other traditional communities. And where will you live? Here or in Los Angeles?" The question made Theodore pause. In recent days, this question had tormented him. Part of him yearned to remain in the valley, where he had found not only physical healing, but a sense of belonging he had never experienced. Another part knew that his resources, contacts, and influence in the capital would be essential to make his new projects viable. "In both places for now," he finally replied. "I'll need to be in Los Angeles to legally structure the foundation and secure initial investments. But I'll return to the valley regularly. This place," he looked at the mountains in the distance, bathed in the setting sun, "It is part of me now." When it was time to temporarily return to Los Angeles, Theodore could already walk short distances with the aid of crutches. Dr. Richard predicted that, with continuous therapy, he could eventually use only a cane for longer distances. The day before their departure, Yara appeared at the house, carrying a small bundle made of patterned cotton fabric. "Grandma sent it for you to take," she said, handing him the package. "To remember the promise." Inside, Theodore found a necklace with a dark wooden pendant carved in the shape of a small tree. He recognized it immediately. It was a piece of the redwood crafted with impressive delicacy. "Tell your grandmother I'll be back soon." "This isn't goodbye, it's just see you later." The girl smiled, but her eyes were serious. "You will come back different, stronger, and you will bring many new things to the valley." "Did you see this in your dreams?" Theodore asked, already accustomed to the girl's premonitory visions. "I didn't need to dream," Yara replied, with a wisdom that transcended her age. "You are a Summers, even with another last name, and the Summers always come home." A year passed like the wind blowing through the Highlands Mountains, sometimes gentle, sometimes turbulent, but always transformative. Autumn again gilded the vegetation when Theodore's adapted van ascended the dirt road leading to Sedona Valley. This time, however, he did not come as a stranger, and it was not the motorized chair that brought him, but his own legs, now capable of supporting him with the aid of a single hardwood cane, carved by George during the months in Los Angeles. Beside him, Helen observed the landscape with eyes that were no longer surprised by the wild beauty of the place, but were still moved by it. In the past 12 months, she had become much more than an assistant. She was now the executive director of the newly created Digital Roots Foundation and, to the surprise of many in the corporate world, Theodore's life partner. "Everyone's waiting in the square," George informed, looking in the rearview mirror. The former security guard now drove with quiet ease on the winding roads, familiar with every curve and elevation. "It seems the entire valley is mobilized for the inauguration," Helen commented, pointing to the colorful banners that could already be seen in the distance. "Are you nervous?" Theodore smiled, caressing the wooden pendant that had never left his neck since Yara gave it to him a year ago. "It's not nervousness. It's more like coming home after a long journey." When the van finally reached the village entrance, Theodore saw that the changes were already visible. Beside the traditional adobe and wattle houses, now stood a building that harmonized local materials with sustainable technology, the Mary Celeste Summers Community Center. The central square was decorated with colorful banners and flowers. Children ran around the redwood tree, while the elders conversed in small groups. Upon seeing the vehicle's arrival, Mr. Sterling rose from the bench where he was sitting, and a murmur of expectation ran through the crowd. When the van door opened, a reverent silence filled the place. Theodore appeared at the entrance, leaning on his cane. With calculated but firm movements, he took the first steps towards the square. Each step was a victory, not just personal but collective. Grandma Juniper came to meet him, her eyes moist with barely contained emotion. Beside her, Yara, now almost 12 years old, taller and with an even more penetrating gaze. "Welcome back, son of the valley," the healer said, opening her arms for an embrace that Theodore received with genuine emotion. "I brought what I promised," he replied, indicating with a gesture the community center that would be officially inaugurated that day. The Mary Celeste Summers Center was the materialization of the dream that was born right there, under the redwood tree a year before. Externally, it respected the traditional architecture and materials of the valley: local stone, reclaimed wood, a roof with a rainwater harvesting system. Internally, it housed cutting-edge technology carefully integrated into the environment: solar energy with efficient storage, satellite connection controlled and limited to specific purposes, and the heart of the project, a digital documentation system for traditional knowledge. The inauguration ceremony was led by Mr. Sterling, as representative of the elders, and Theodore, representing the bridge between worlds. The doors were opened, and residents could explore the different spaces. A health clinic that integrated traditional practices and conventional medicine, a laboratory for processing and analyzing medicinal plants, a physical and digital library for preserving oral histories, and a training room where young people from the valley could learn both ancestral knowledge and contemporary technological skills. "This is just the first of many centers we plan to build," Theodore explained during the ceremony. "The foundation is already in contact with Gullah Geechee communities in the Carolinas, Navajo Nation villages, and Alaskan Native communities. Each center will be unique, adapted to the specific needs and knowledge of each people, but all will share the same purpose: to preserve disappearing knowledge and to build bridges between worlds that seem distant but are deeply complementary." The residents' eyes shone as they imagined Sedona Valley as the epicenter of a transformation that could spread across the entire United States. It was not just a building they were inaugurating, but a new concept of development, one that did not demand the abandonment of tradition in the name of progress. After the guided tour, while the community gathered for a celebration with food and music, Theodore sought a moment of quiet under the redwood tree. Sitting on a bench specially designed to relieve pressure on his still recovering legs, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him there. "It seems like yesterday I saw her for the first time," a familiar voice said behind him. It was Dr. Richard, who had arrived that morning for the inauguration. The doctor sat beside Theodore, looking at the ancient tree with a mixture of scientific respect and something more, an openness that didn't exist a year ago. "I still can't fully explain your recovery," the doctor continued. "Tests show neural regeneration that defies everything I learned in medical school. It's as if your body found alternative pathways, routes that shouldn't exist." Theodore smiled. "Perhaps science and ancestry aren't so different, Richard. Both seek patterns, hidden connections, paths to healing. The difference is that science needs to prove while ancestry knows," Theodore completed. "Simply knows." The doctor nodded. A year of direct witness had transformed his skepticism into respectful curiosity. "We are documenting your entire case. It could open doors for new treatment approaches for similar conditions." "That's exactly why we created this center," Theodore replied. "So that this knowledge isn't lost, so that it can dialogue with science instead of being swallowed by it." "Secure tech is also unrecognizable," Dr. Richard commented. "I never imagined seeing it developing systems for the protection of traditional knowledge and intangible cultural heritage." Theodore laughed softly. "Michael is doing an exceptional job as CEO. We found that the algorithms that protected corporate data are perfectly adaptable to safeguard ancestral knowledge. Deep down, it's always about preserving what has value." The sound of music and laughter brought them back to the present moment. The celebration was in full swing in the square. Theodore rose with the help of his cane and, together with the doctor, returned to the party. Later, as the sun began to set, Grandma Juniper approached Theodore with a serious expression. "I need to show you something," she said, gesturing for him to follow. "Bring Helen too." With curiosity, the couple followed the healer to a private room in the community center. There they found Yara sitting in front of one of the newly installed computers, completely absorbed in what she was doing. Her fingers moved with surprising agility over the keyboard, while the screen displayed what appeared to be complex programming code. "It started 3 months ago," Grandma Juniper explained in a low voice. She had never touched a computer before. The technicians who came to install the equipment left some machines on for testing. "When I came back, I found Yara like this." The old woman indicated her granddaughter with a respectful gesture. "She says she sees the complete codes in her mind even before typing them." Helen approached, observing the girl's work with growing admiration. "This is incredible. She's creating a pattern recognition algorithm, and from what I can see, it's extremely sophisticated." Theodore watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and profound understanding. Grandma Juniper's words about the gift that transforms, that adapts to each generation, made even more sense now. "The gift is finding new paths," he murmured. Yara finally noticed their presence and turned, a smile illuminating her young face. "I'm creating a system that can recognize medicinal plants from photographs," she explained simply. "That way people in other places can identify what grows around them and learn about traditional uses." Helen looked at Theodore, an idea instantly forming between them. "She needs proper training," she whispered. "With the right guidance, this talent can transform not only the valley, but traditional communities across the United States." "It's as if the summer's healing gift has evolved into a new expression," Theodore observed. "Instead of healing individual bodies with hands, she can heal entire communities with code." The next morning, while the community was still resting from the celebration, Theodore, Helen, and Grandma Juniper talked at length about Yara's future. They decided to create a special mentorship program that would allow the girl to develop her technological skills without abandoning her roots in the valley and learning traditional practices with her grandmother. "I don't want her to repeat Mary Celeste's story," Grandma Juniper stated firmly. She shouldn't have to choose between the gift and the world outside. And she won't have to, Helen assured. We can bring teachers here, combine formal education with traditional knowledge. When the time is right, she can study in Los Angeles for periods, but always keeping the valley as her center. Theodore listened to the conversation with a deep sense of gratitude. A year ago, he had arrived there as a divided man, between body and mind, between the present and lost origins. Now he was helping to build a bridge so that others would not have to experience that same rupture. In the afternoon, Yara took Theodore and Helen to the field of ancestors, now exuberant with yellow flowers in full bloom. It was the same field that had appeared in the girls' premonitory dreams, the same one Theodore had visited on the night of revelation a year before. "This is where you will walk without a cane," Yara said with the quiet conviction that had always characterized her visions. Theodore looked at the undulating field, then at Helen, who nodded encouragingly. The gentle wind carried the sweet scent of the flowers, and the afternoon sun bathed everything in an almost surreal golden light. He took a deep breath, feeling every muscle in his legs, every nerve connection laboriously recovered over the past year. With a deliberate movement, he released his cane, which Helen promptly collected. The first step was hesitant, the second firmer. By the third, he had found his own rhythm, not the confident stride of someone who had never known limitations, but the determined step of someone who had reclaimed every inch of his path. "Go to the center," Helen encouraged, remaining at a distance to give him the space needed for this personal achievement. He advanced across the field, the flowers brushing his knees, the wind rustling his hair, exactly as in Yara's vision, exactly as in the recurring dream that had guided him there. Each step brought a new sensation, the uneven terrain under his feet, the resistance of the taller plants, the effort required to maintain balance without support. It was an overwhelming sensory experience for someone who had spent their entire life deprived of these simple sensations. Upon reaching the center of the field, Theodore stopped and closed his eyes, feeling the sun on his face and the firm earth beneath his feet. An overwhelming emotion swept over him, not just for the physical conquest, but for the inner journey that had transformed him completely. When he opened his eyes, he glimpsed for a fleeting instant the silhouette of a woman with long black hair among the distant flowers. A smile, a wave, and then only the movement of the wind in the plants. "Thank you, great-grandmother," he murmured, silent tears streaming down his face. He remained there for almost an hour, sometimes walking in small circles, sometimes simply standing, absorbing the fullness of the moment. When he finally decided to return, he walked back alone, without a cane, under the emotional gaze of Helen and Yara. That night, gathered around the bonfire in the central square, Theodore shared stories from Los Angeles, of the Foundation's progress, of plans to expand the project to other traditional communities. Secure Tech, now under new direction, prospered with its broadened focus on cultural data security and the protection of ancestral knowledge. "I discovered that my true calling was never just technology," he explained to the attentive community. "It was to build bridges between the past and the future, between science and ancestry, between the tangible and the invisible." "The project in the Gullah Geechee corridor is already underway," Helen added. "We are documenting ritual chants, cultivation techniques, and medicinal practices that have survived for centuries, despite all attempts at erasure. And next month," Theodore continued, "we begin our partnership with the Association of Traditional Midwives of the Alaskan Native Villages. The knowledge of natural childbirth they preserve can revolutionize contemporary obstetrics, saving lives in both remote communities and urban hospitals." Mr. Sterling, who listened attentively, added, "And in doing so, you healed not only yourself, but helped heal the wound opened when Mary Celeste left the valley." Grandma Juniper, sitting beside Yara, nodded solemnly. The circle closes. What was separated reintegrates. Later, when most had retired, Theodore remained by the almost extinguished bonfire, talking with Grandma Juniper about the next steps of the treatment and the project. The healer watched the embers with eyes that seemed to see beyond them. "Do you know what your great-grandmother said in the diary?" she asked suddenly. "That the true gift of the summers was never to heal bodies, but to reconnect lost paths, whether in the nerves, in the soul, or in the history of a people. Theodore reflected on those words, feeling their profound meaning. His own journey had been exactly that, a reconnection. With his origins, with his true calling, with a greater purpose that transcended material gains or power. And now? He asked, genuinely curious about how the wise woman saw his future. Grandma Juniper smiled, revealing the marks of a long and full life. Now you walk your own path, Theodore Summers Avery. Neither entirely of the valley nor entirely of the city. A new path that others will follow. He nodded, understanding. The cold, calculating entrepreneur who arrived in Sedona Valley in a wheelchair had metaphorically died. The man who now walked with his own steps between two worlds was a synthesis. He carried within him the analytical precision of the technologist and the deep intuition of the healer. The next morning, before beginning the journey back to Los Angeles, Theodore and Helen met again with Yara in the field of ancestors. The girl held a small laptop, a gift Helen had brought especially for her. "I'm going to create a program that stores all the stories of the valley," Yara declared, her eyes shining with the same determination Theodore recognized in himself. "And then the stories of other places like ours that are being lost. And we will help you," Helen promised, gently touching the girl's shoulder. "Your vision and our resources together." "I've already thought about what the app will be like," Yara continued enthusiastically. "It will have voice recognition for the elders who can't write, and 3D images of medicinal plants that show how to prepare remedies, and maps that mark the sacred places that need to be protected." Theodore exchanged a meaningful look with Helen. There was the future they imagined, taking shape through the words of a child born at the intersection of two worlds. "When you are ready," he said to Yara, "there will be a place waiting for you at the foundation. But don't rush. Learn first from your grandmother, from the earth, from the slow pace of the valley. Technology will be there when you decide it's time." Theodore observed the interaction between the two, feeling a strange certainty that he was witnessing the birth of something extraordinary, the ancestral gift of the Summers, manifesting in a new language, adapted for a new time. As he walked back to the village, leaning lightly on his cane, Theodore reflected on the cycles of life, on how what seems like an end is often just a beginning in disguise. His neurological condition, which he had long considered a prison, had in fact been the path that brought him back to his origins, that connected him to a greater purpose. There, among the ancient mountains of the Arizona highlands, under the serene gaze of the redwood tree that had seen generations pass, Theodore Maxwell Avery, now also Summers, by his own choice, finally understood the final words of his great-grandmother's diary. "The greatest healing is not that which repairs the body, but that which restores us to ourselves." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Theodore's journey through Sedona Valley has deeply touched your hearts. Just as he rediscovered his roots and found healing beyond the physical, perhaps this story has awakened reflections in you about your own lost connections and paths to rediscover. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other stories that explore reconnecting with our origins. Find it by clicking here. If this narrative resonated with your soul, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every day we bring unique stories that celebrate the rich tapestry of American cultures and the ancestral wisdom that lives within each of us. We eagerly await your comments on what touched your heart most in Theodore and Yara's journey.